Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins podcast with your host, Ashley Crowder.
Hi, welcome to Connected in 3D, Real-Time Solutions and Digital Twins. I'm your host, Ashley Crowder, the co-founder of Ventana, and I'm so excited to be here today with Annie Eaton, founder and CEO of Futurus. She is an immersive content producer and XR-focused company specializing in virtual and augmented reality training and product visualization. She also serves as executive producer at Amoebus Labs and recently published the Extended Reality Blueprint to demystify AR VR production. She's a leader in Atlanta XR community, and she manages XR Atlanta and is actively involved in Women in XR, which is awesome, and has been recognized by Women in Technology, Fast Company, and the Technology Association of Georgia. So Annie, thank you so much for joining us. Really excited to learn more about the amazing XR training experiences you and your team creates.
Thank you, Ashley. I'm so excited about today's conversation.
Awesome. So just to kind of start, you founded Futurus nearly a decade ago. So man, we've been in this together for about a decade.
Yep.
What inspired you to start the company and how has your vision kind of evolved since then?
Yeah, I definitely see this trend, and I was a part of it of getting wooed by another VR evangelist. I think so many of us who are in this industry had a similar story, but I was working at another company, and a friend of mine at that company was a recipient, I guess, I mean, he paid for it, but the Oculus DK1, so the first of the Oculus line of headsets. And he brought it into work and was trying to show it to people. And I was one of the people that took it seriously and got really excited about it. So prior to starting the company, we actually worked together to create a meetup group called the Atlanta Virtual Reality Meetup, which is, yes, now XR Atlanta, as you mentioned in the intro. And we had so many people show up to the first event that it just kind of caught on. And we were in Atlanta with our names associated with the technology. And we took kind of advantage of the opportunity of that. And so when people would ask us how their companies could use VR, we were like, we can help you with that. And my background was in marketing prior to that. So before I got into training, it was a lot of product visualization tools or even events marketing experiences. And so when those opportunities arose, we were able to help them figure out how to navigate that and then eventually started adding staff to be able to execute those ideas for them and bring them to fruition. And then that evolved over, 10 years, a lot of different ups and downs and navigations throughout how we were going to apply the technology, and then eventually settled on training. But it all just started with a really enthusiastic friend and the vision to take advantage of this technology that we all thought was really exciting at the time and just see where we could take it.
That's awesome. Yeah, and that's how a lot of people start. It's like this technology, I thought it was like it's incredible. It's going to change the world. It's going to change everything. How do I help that? you
Hmm.
know,
Exactly.
um, and so at Futurist, you guys work at really the cutting edge of emerging tech since the beginning. What are some of the most exciting projects you've worked on, and how have they pushed the boundaries of AR and VR?
Yeah, I mean, I think back to some of our very early projects. One of our first projects we did with a fashion show, and it was a nonprofit, Easter Seals, and they were putting on a fundraiser fashion show, and we were able to create a virtual reality fashion show. And again, this was like back in, I think, 2015 at the time. So this was completely unheard of. We actually filmed the models who were participants and the winner of the previous year's like fashion show competition, film them in 3D, and then we were able to bring those like real feeds of those models into a completely virtual rendered fashion show environment and then have that as a part of the VIP lounge experience. So when I mentioned that we did a lot of events and marketing and experiential engagements, that was probably the first. Meanwhile, on the total opposite end of the spectrum, we did a project with Coke Business Solutions, which is funny because now we still work with multiple of their companies to this day. But the whole point was to bring a 3D model of a piece of their equipment from one of their very industrial sites into the boardroom and create this virtual boardroom and see that piece of machinery. And they wanted to even add like their pillars on the wall or their guiding principles and just have it feel like their company, but also this virtual space again in 2015. So you see where it was, you see where it is now, and you see kind of similarities. It's just the technology has advanced so much that we can do even more. And I think one of the most memorable outside of the awesome training sims we do now was a project we did for the Super Bowl back in 2019. We got to work with United Way of Greater Atlanta and also in partnership with the NFL to bring stories to life about challenging situations that middle schoolers may be put into
Mm.
and allow them the experience to make a decision in a very safe environment, see what the outcomes of those decisions would be so that they feel more confident if they are experiencing these situations in real life. And so we worked with some NFL players to capture their stories from when they were younger and recreate those in VR and just create
Mhm.
this exciting experience that was premiered at the Super Bowl over a 12-day period. They typically have about a week and a half of events leading up to the game. And it was just really cool to see both the impact of like excitement and fun with the kids, but also a lesson that would then help them in their daily lives and how to encounter or how to navigate when they encounter bullying or someone gossiping or any of those types of very real situations.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And that kind of goes to show like the diversity of industries that really can benefit from the tech. I mean, today with focusing on training, majority of your customers are in sorry. Today focused on training. Are the majority of your customers within like heavy machinery, manufacturing? Like what industries are you seeing benefit the most from XR training?
I would say, I mean, we work across several different industries. So our active training projects right now are in retail, aviation, and manufacturing, among some others to come. But I think that manufacturing is probably seeing the best results, and I don't. And it might just be because they have an easier path to measuring those results. And any manufacturing plant that I have visited, which I've gotten lucky enough to go behind the scenes of several, they are so on it with their tracking. They've got all their numbers, they've got them displayed. I mean, safety incidents are tracked at a meticulous level, which I'm grateful for. And
Mhm.
so I think one of the biggest things is not only just to see these results, but also have something to measure them against to be able to prove out the effectiveness of the technology. And I'm sure that's happening. I mean, with our retail customers as well as aviation, they're measuring that absolutely. I just don't know that that's something that they share as openly. So I think luckily all of our customers are seeing very positive results, which I can get into shortly if you'd like. But manufacturing is probably the easiest to measure.
Yeah, no, that's great. So, what is some of the ROI that people are seeing? Because that's the number one thing, right? This technology is
Hmm.
cool, it's amazing, it's fun, but why are people buying it? Right? Like,
Yeah.
why does it matter to that business?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can give a couple of examples. And again, these are specific to manufacturing. So I had one manufacturing customer, they're consumer packaged goods manufacturer, and they had done some testing between non-VR and VR training classes. And they were able to recognize a 30% increase in knowledge retention with the virtual reality class. So that was very positive. All of the curriculum was safety themed in the simulations that they were leveraging and also doing that testing against. So, any significant increase in that knowledge retention is only going to help their employees perform the job more safely and also think about, exactly what they're doing on the job based on what they learn in VR. And then I had another manufacturing client, this one in food manufacturing, that this was all very specific machine training, and they were able to reduce their training time in half. So the previous training time for this machinery was 12 weeks, and they were able to drop that down to 6 weeks, leveraging virtual reality. There were a lot of different reasons why, but one was that they didn't have to bring their employees to do all of their machine training into the actual facility. It's very difficult to hear in those facilities. It's extremely loud, and especially when you're wearing hearing protection, that doesn't help. It helps and it doesn't. So
Yeah.
They were able to bring it into a quiet classroom, still have the same machinery replicated, animated, and completely interactive. And then you get to learn about the machinery and about certain processes that you're expected to do every shift. And that really made a huge impact. So much so that they saw their employees coming out of training 18% more operationally efficient than previous trainees that were not using VR.
That's huge. That's
Mhm.
awesome. And when you're building these experiences, what I think is so cool is I know you focus on like that storytelling through XR. So, how do you go about creating that balance between creativity and technical constraints, as well as you know technical constraints just with like the hardware and what's possible? Like people are always like, well, how real can it look? And it's like, well,
Mhm.
the render isn't as important as what you're being taught at the end of the day. So kind of walk me through like how you go about creating these experiences and what that process is like.
Yeah, I guess I'll touch on storytelling first. And it's unfortunately not something that we always get to weave into our training simulations, but in certain ones that we have done recently, there is a good opportunity to weave in storytelling when you are showing what could go wrong on a job. So that is one thing that we've tried to do, and actually some of our customers have been very successful in implementing it this way. We even have a new product that we're about to release that includes this as well. But by showing someone not themselves getting injured, but a coworker, and framing it as a coworker or someone you're working with on this site being injured, sometimes that has a bigger impact than if you were in VR first person view seeing, something happen to yourself. First off, you're not able to see the full picture when it's happening to you. So if you're kind of separated and standing outside of that scenario, you can really see the whole impact of what's happening and how it happened. But second, I think sometimes like, we're as people like I don't know, self-preservation, people have different ways that they handle it themselves, but like if you see something happen to yourself, like you're like, "Oh, okay, oops, I guess I don't know, I cut myself." But like
Yeah.
if I see like my husband or my child cut themselves, I don't know, it has emotionally a bigger impact on me than if I cut myself. So, because I just kind of brush it off. But if I see them, like I want to help them, I want to prevent it from happening again, and I want to like, take care of them. So I know that's like a family example, but it can kind of be said the same way. Whereas if you see something bad happening to someone else, a human, an empathetic human would think about that and remember it and know that they don't want that to happen again. So again, these are more like subjective thoughts on why it's been effective, but I do think showing something happen to a coworker in these scenarios does have a greater impact on how you remember it versus experiencing that yourself. And so that is a way that we've been able to weave storytelling into virtual reality training. Now, your other question about like the realism and the limitations of the hardware and how we've navigated that, I agree with you. You don't have to have photorealistic models and renderings to be able to have an effective experience. And I think that's something that a lot of people still don't realize until they experience it for themselves. And I've seen some companies market like we have the most realistic looking graphics. We have, all of these things that is amazing and fantastic. If you're doing product visualization, that's super important, or architecture or construction, that can be very important. But if your focus is the interactivity and these mobile headsets that we have access to, which is fantastic because I don't want to be tethered to a computer, but if
Yeah.
they are what everyone is using, the best thing you can do is to create a smooth user experience that runs on the headset at a good frame rate that's not going to make someone uncomfortable. And if we have to drop the graphics down a little bit, if we have to, create lower poly models to be able to support that and give the trainee that level of interactivity that's really going to make an impact on remembering that process, then that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I love seeing beautiful graphics. I mean, I think many people hopefully who are listening, if they've gotten a chance to try an Apple Vision Pro, have seen that dinosaur experience it comes with. Like, that is insane. But we also need to be realistic about what is achievable in a training simulation for the budget that most of these companies have. We
Right.
can't be producing AAA games for everybody, even though that would be super fun. So we work within the limitations that we have, and we still find great results.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important because, especially if people are new to XR, they come in and they put on the headset and they're wowed and they might have tons of ideas, which is great. But sometimes it's like, yes, but to your point, it can, we AAA game costs millions of dollars
Hmm.
and let's, what's the goal? How are we going to get there? And I loved, Delta, how they started with you all of that first use case, which was just walking around the plane and picking
Hmm.
up the FOD, I think it's called, because when
Yeah.
you think about the amount of development required, it's one plane, it's a person walking around, and then once that was successful, then they created more intense kind of experiences, which I thought was really smart to kind of get buy-in, prove the value, and then expand.
Yeah, the way they handled it was super smart. And so we started working with Delta a little bit after that. We had another company in Atlanta that started that work and did an incredible job, and then they got acquired, which is amazing.
Oh
So
wow.
we got to take it over. So we got to make some updates to that project
Cool.
and hopefully some more soon. But I think that is also another thing that you have to consider when you're doing these initial projects is yes, you start small, but that doesn't mean that that project lives and dies with that one deployment. Most of these simulations, I mean, they're all created from a set of models that can have life beyond what you deploy it as. I mean, I know you're in that game about
Yeah.
the reuse and optimization of these models, so you know it better than anyone. But I do like to make sure that people know that is these virtual reality experiences can be living and they can change and evolve as the technology evolves. I mean, one of the coolest things to see is that work that we created years ago that's still being used and updated. Like we didn't even have to update the graphics. The hardware did that for us. Like we
Wow.
already had it looking pretty good. And then once we have these newer headsets that are more powerful, have better lenses, have higher processing power, everything just looks nicer. So we don't always have to even do anything to get those benefits. So it's interesting to watch, and as you and I are in it every single day. Like
Yeah.
sometimes we don't notice these things, but if you look at something from even 2, 3 years ago to now, the jump is pretty significant. And it's cool to look back and see, former projects bring new life with these new headsets.
Oh, that's awesome. And I think that's so important. So, as companies think about delving into XR, making sure that it is scalable and reusable. And yeah, that's where, we come at Ventana being a 3D asset management platform because you should know where your 3D models are. They're very valuable and convert them to be able to use them in different use cases. But a full-on training experience should be the same way for sure. And with that, how are companies scaling this technology and what are some of the biggest challenges you've seen companies kind of overcome as they're trying to deploy this type of tech across their organization?
Yeah, when we talk about scaling, I always like to say you can scale one of two ways. At least this is how I explain it to my customers. So you can scale wide, which I see as scaling across many people and many locations, but it's like the same content that's kind of generalized for everybody. It can be specific to a company, but generalized for everybody. And then I see the opposite, well, not even opposite, just an alternative way of scaling is scaling deep. I think I made this up, but I don't know. So if this sounds crazy, but scaling deep to me means that you've picked one part of your business, whether it's one machine or a small set of machines or one location or one practice that you do, and you create a lot of content that is like hyper focused on that small subset of whatever it is that your company does. So with that food manufacturer I mentioned earlier, I would consider that scaling deep because they chose one machine line of machinery that has a very high potential of revenue for the company, but there is a lot to learn with that machinery. So creating a way to learn about it generally and then learn about the processes and then learn about the hazards and then learn about this inspection, and creating all of this different content. That's one way they've been able to scale across a machine line and across still many employees, hundreds, maybe thousands, but not hundreds of thousands.
Yeah.
And they're very successful with that. And then you look at other clients of mine, like one of my retail clients, like, and or even this other manufacturing client, they deploy the content that is made for everyone at their company across certain job roles that goes out to every single site. So it's the same for every site, but again, that's effective in a different way. So I think you can't go wrong if you're thinking about scaling. You just have to kind of decide which way you're scaling. Um, and so, yeah, I say scale deep or wide, and
Yeah.
that's kind of where I guide people. You have options with scaling. It doesn't just have to be across the entire organization. You can scale in different ways.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And when companies are trying to go about that, sometimes it's hard to get people to adopt XR. What are some of the strategies that you found effective for helping
Yeah.
businesses really like integrate immersive tech into the like fiber of how they work?
I definitely think the hardware piece of it is still a challenge for many. So they understand that it can be effective. They understand what the software, like they understand training content or learning content. The hardware piece of it can be difficult for a multitude of reasons. First off, getting people to put it on can sometimes be a challenge if they are unfamiliar or uneducated or just scared of it, or they don't want to look silly. I think I was talking to someone at a conference recently, and we're like, "What has been the biggest barrier for us?" And we were all talking about it. I'm like, "People just don't want to look dumb." And they don't understand that, like, if everyone's doing it, no one looks dumb.
Yeah.
So I think still like the social perception of VR is a barrier that all of us still have to overcome, even decades later.
Hmm.
And so that's a big one. And then there also is the management of that. So you've got the people aspect of like just getting them to do it, because usually once they do it, they like it.
Hmm.
But then you have the like managing with IT, and for them to accept VR, a lot of times they have to create entirely new processes to even be able to accept VR into their systems or network. Um, I'm very grateful for mobile device management companies like ArborXR, because like before, and I'm sure anyone out there who has been at it a while like remembers, we had to plug devices into computers and drag and drop files, and that is now antiquated, thank goodness. So
Yeah.
just the ability to like be able to deploy wirelessly in a private way is not only something that's helpful to us as the people releasing the content or deploying the content, but also to the organizations we're deploying into, because they have less questions and they have less concerns when there is a system like that in place. So I think like all of the pieces are there. It's just a matter of someone educating the organization on exactly what you need to do, which is why we, and I think every content producer out there in VR should be consultative, even if you don't think you should be. Like it really does take that consultative approach, or at least be able to guide them into all of these different parts that they will have to think about, to make the program more successful and stick within that organization.
For sure. I joke like we're consultants who don't get paid.
Yeah, I know we
But
don't get paid for consulting. Yeah, you're
yeah,
right, but we are.
yeah. But no, I mean it is a new medium, and anyone trying to deploy this in their organization, how do you do it? How do you make it successful?
Hmm.
So that makes a ton of sense. Um, and the other thing, of course, that makes it even more difficult is that the industry is rapidly changing, because if there's one thing true about tech is that it will always update and
Hmm.
change. So what is some advice you can give to companies trying to future proof their 3D and immersive strategies?
Yeah, I would say there is no way to completely future proof. Oh my gosh, future proof. All we can do is future plan. And the good news is a lot of the headset manufacturers are getting on board with some fairly universal, or at least open source, software development kits. Or I know like OpenXR, thank goodness, is something that most are gravitating towards when it comes to coming up with these universal standards and adhering to them. Now, all of them seem to have their own little tweaking of these standards, but I think the more we can move into that direction, the better. Um, I don't like, usually when we have a new headset come out. So take Pico for example. We'll boot up our old simulations that we're running on a Pico device. We'll run it on the new hardware, and 9 times out of 10, it still works. There might have to be a little tweaking here or there, but the good thing and something that people should take comfort in who are worried about this is that typically when new hardware comes out, as long as it's a part of like the same line, it is backwards compatible. I don't know if that's the right word there.
Yeah.
And we don't have to completely rebuild everything. So worrying about, some huge cost when it comes to new releases isn't as big of a concern as it once was. So,
Yeah. That's great. And I think you hinted at this a little bit, but also with Google pushing like Android XR,
mhm.
hopefully helps to simplify things across headsets, which we'll see. It's a little ways out, but
Yes, and I think that something I'm excited about with that is just the opportunity for new players to emerge. So we've of course got like bigger ones, obviously Meta with their Quest line, and HTC has been around a while, and Pico's pretty good. I mean, we use them a ton, but it's also opening up opportunities for new hardware, well, old hardware manufacturers to enter this space with a new standardized operating system. So I am very excited about that because anytime there's competition, it means it's going to drive all of these competitors in the hardware arena to be better and challenge each other. And we, as the consumers, as well as the software producers, get the benefits of that.
yeah, no, I completely agree because yeah, before you had to be a hardware and software company to build
Mhm.
everything, and
Yep.
there's only so many behemoths that can afford that. Uh,
Mhm.
that makes a lot of sense. And the other positive with technology, I mean, everyone can't stop talking about AI. We were talking in the beginning before we started, just how it's kind of like drowning out everything else. But it is making content creation easier, which is exciting. And then we also have 5G now with better internet. I mean, how do you see all these technologies evolving over the next 5 years? Like, where do you see immersive tech going?
Ooh, the big question that everyone wishes they knew the answer to. I mean, I think there's a couple different things I hope will happen in the next 5 years. I do hope that um, and I guess it's already starting to happen, but like these devices that are now mixed reality or spatial computing that have the pass through and the ability to basically switch between an AR and a VR device, I want that to continue to progress because I think the more we can move in that direction, the more we move towards a ubiquitous device that everyone will use and everyone will adopt. So I'm excited that that's already happening. Some of the devices have incredibly impressive pass-through capabilities. I mean, the Apple Vision Pro, really, the pass-through on that is kind of freaking me out. And I'm excited to see that it can be done and it can be done in a way that's not making me uncomfortable. And so moving towards that direction, I think will only get better and better over the next 5 years. When it comes to I mean, there are as you mentioned, it's kind of drowning out VR right now or XR right now because everyone's talking about it. And I'm like, we've been here, but I think it will ultimately benefit the industry because the time it takes to produce VR content is so lengthy. And one of the things that, of course, is very important is optimization of these virtual environments. And so I think anything that can come out, any tools or help with that to be able to give these tools to the content creators to be able to expedite that process is only going to make more content. Hopefully, it'll be good content that will drive adoption again for the industry and also allow people who maybe didn't think they could be creators to become creators. So I'm excited about that potential. And then, as far as again, just the future and use cases, I am excited to see more companies picking up VR as a way to either train or use it in some way and integrate that with digital twin technology or use it for customer service, use it in all different ways, use it for more brand engagements. I mean, I feel like it's been there. We've been on the cusp and we're already seeing some great results. So now it's like, all right, we've got this, we've proven it out. Now what? So I'm
Yeah.
hoping that it's this tipping point for the companies that were kind of waiting for that validation from the early adopter companies, that they see it now and they're like, all right, I'm ready to pull the trigger on that. So those are the three things I'm most excited about in the next 5 years.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I think it's so interesting. Like we actually started within that event brand marketing space too, because I think it was like such a great way to experiment
Yeah.
and kind of test out the technology. And to your point, I mean, content is king. It's what is that experience? What are you emotion are you driving for the user, whether that's for training or entertainment? So, if you had unlimited resources, what XR experience would you love to create?
Oh my gosh, unlimited resources. That sounds like a dream come true.
Yeah.
Um, I know this is going to sound ridiculous, but I would just go even harder into the new product that we're working on right now, which is a framework to deliver VR safety content, but it's sitting kind of at the intersection of off the shelf and custom content. So we've done custom content all these years and we love doing it. It's been, what's built my business for the past 10 years. I love doing it. And we're seeing a shift in the market that there is a lot of opportunity for off the shelf, but there isn't really like a true one size fits all model that works. At least I don't think it does. And so we've created a framework that will support off the shelf content, but have these companion tools that allow you to change the environments, change the configurations for like the scoring or even the questions you're asking. Or even like we have a pedestrian intersection and like, do you see a forklift go by or do you see an autonomous vehicle go by? Like you can pick that as the trainer. And so I think coming up with more user friendly VR content that allows you to make those changes without having to deal with a developer or a development team. I'm hoping that that is like a new genre of content that starts to come out. And I'm hoping that we get to be a part of the start of that. So, mine is called XR Industrial, and it's coming out very soon. But I'm hoping that this is the framework that we can expand to other industries and other use cases. And so, if I had unlimited resources, I think I would really want to just build it out as big as it could be.
Yeah, that's amazing. Because yeah, it is kind of crazy when you think about it. We're
Mhm.
building a video game one off for each company
Yep.
and use case, which is kind
Yeah.
of insane, you know.
Yeah.
Um, and so that your industrial XR tool sounds like a really great way for people to get started too. At least when you talk about like how do you get started, start
Hmm.
small, prove the ROI, and then sure, maybe it makes sense to build your own custom experience. But that's amazing. So Annie, thank you so much for joining. Where can people find you and find more information about your company?
Yeah, I am, well, as you know, Annie Eaton. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn, so that's probably the best place to look me up. The company Futurus, you can find also on LinkedIn or futurist.com. And then we have information about XR Industrial on our website. And then my book just came out last year called The Extended Reality Blueprint, and it is available pretty much anywhere you buy books. But you can find more about that at xrblueprint.com.
Awesome. Annie, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Ashley. This is great.